This is going to be a quick video which may turn out to be quite convoluted, and I'm not really sure if it's going to be comprehensible to many of you, and I'm not sure how many people are going to empathise with it. But I kind of felt like making it because I've been doing a lot of thinking recently on my spiritual path with regard to magic, the value of magical systems, how I understand and interpret magical systems, and the traumal feelings that I've had with regard to magical systems that are already set in place and that are widely embraced because of my inability to see them as having anything to do with me or how I personally feel about magic. Basically, what I've established recently, particularly in the last few months, is that my approach toward magic as a concept is very scholarly. So I know a lot about it. I appreciate a lot about it and how it works. My practical experience of it really is quite limited. And it's kind of weird for me to say this because my relationship with ritual is pretty much the strongest it can be and will ever be. Aside from the fact that I feel I don't have enough time to pack in as much ritual as I'd like to, I feel like my relationship with ritual and my place in that part of my path is strong and fortified, and I understand it. Whereas my relationship with magic has always been something of a complication. And I think that this is purely for the reason that I've done a lot of studying with regard to systems that are accepted, systems that are widely used and held dear in the neo-pagan community, and they don't really mean much to me on a personal level, on an emotional level. I see the value and the emotional resonance in casting a circle, but the approach that a great many neo-pagans who use magic and perform magic have to the importance of the four elements is something that I've never really understood. I appreciate the four elements with regard to how I work with tarot and with regard to what they represent psychologically and what they represent in terms of the different energies that exist in the world and how we relate to them and so on. And of course, as a pagan, I value those four elements anyway, and I love them, and they make me feel fortified and at one with the universe and all that good stuff. But do I feel that they have any place necessarily in my magical workings as elements of focus or areas of importance or energies that I can really draw on and work with? No, not particularly. I don't do any invoking or evoking, obviously, because of my beliefs. They're not really conducive to that kind of area. And I think that a lot of things that are done in spellcraft feel superfluous to me or don't have any resonance with me. I feel lately that, as William Blake said, I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. That's really how I feel. I feel like it's time for me to create my own system, or at least to give a voice to the feelings that I've had about my own magical practice and my desire to practice magic in my own way. It's never really been given a voice before. It's never really seen the light of day before. I've never really given it a chance to become its own thing, to legitimize it as my own personal system. And I've really started to do that recently, fairly recently, and it's scary. And the way that I got myself to this really was through admitting to myself that a lot of the practices that are used in magic and a lot of the ideas that do the rounds in magic and have become very popular in magic really have nothing to do with me, you know? I'm not really about representing the four elements in the circle, and I'm not necessarily about utilising energies that come from nature as in anything that pertains to the four elements. I'm also not really about natural objects per se. I don't necessarily feel that those things hold any kind of real power or significance in my circle. My circle is full of things you wouldn't expect. My circle is, the objects that I use and the things that I feel could pertain to magical power or be invested with magical power or inspire my magical being are ephemera and kitsch and toys from second-hand stores that I can do psychometry on, and I don't know, I don't want to go too far into it and the complexity of it, but what I'm basically saying is that I began this journey a few weeks ago where I really admitted to myself that the kind of magic that is often spoken about and held in high regard and does a lot of good for a lot of people and really works and really helps them to manifest their intent, it doesn't have anything to do with me, it doesn't resonate with me, it doesn't inspire me at all. And I appreciate that a lot of witches feel that the element of tradition is of great importance to them in their magical workings, and that they want to adhere to a strict system or a certain strategic approach that has been favoured and approved of and has been used, and obviously the results of it can be verified and it stood the test of time, and it's what other witches do, and that in itself gives it a great amount of power and kind of bolsters it as a system. I can appreciate all of that, but it doesn't really work for me. Magic, obviously, itself as a concept is ancient, so I am tapping into a tradition that is as old as time immemorial. However, the way in which I want to utilise my magical feeling and the way in which I want to direct my energy is very different to the kind of things I've heard described by a great many, well, all witches really. So I started doing some exploration in this area and trying to see if I could find out if there are groups of witches or people that utilise magic who have kind of very much gone their own way and have gone completely out of the box and have utilised whatever inspires them and whatever comes to mind, whether it's pop culture or seemingly meaningless tact, maybe embracing a certain fictional work as a sacred text for a couple of weeks as some kind of experiment to see if it holds the eternal truth. I don't know, like maybe studying and analysing and exploring Alice in Wonderland as though it were the Bible, seeing what comes out of that, mad, kind of off the wall, very out of the box ideas. And that's only scratching the surface of the kind of thing that I think maybe we've woven into my magical practice eventually, and that's been on my mind a lot. So I went searching, and I discovered obviously that I clearly haven't read enough about chaos magic for a kick-off. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is going to be the next big part of my journey. I'm literally dipping my toe in the water with this. I appreciate the fact that they follow the psychological model in magic. I like some of their ideas. I like sigil magic particularly. I very much tap into the idea of servitors, but on the other hand, their whole idea of belief as a tool is a little bit of a conundrum for me, because my belief has stood me in good stead and kind of aids and nourishes my magical self, but it's not something I use as a tool to achieve a result. It genuinely is my belief. So, I mean, if you don't know a great deal about chaos magic, none of that will have made any sense to you. But from what I've learned about it, most chaos magicians, as I believe they like to be called, or witches who utilise chaos magic, are very much doing their own thing in terms of their magical practice, in terms of the kind of spellcraft they're putting together. It's not, cast a circle, call the corners, have certain objects there that pertain to certain things in the natural world or give you certain energies, then you evoke the goddess, etc, etc. And I'm not just talking about Wicca here. Like, obviously Wicca is a very accepted and approved of religion in the neo-pagan umbrella. It's very popular, it has a lot of adherents, and there's more books about Wicca than anything else under that umbrella. But I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about even eclectic witches, when they discuss their magical practice and when they discuss what they do, it's not that far off the beaten track. And I'm not saying that's wrong in any way. Obviously, if you're an eclectic witch, then you have accepted and discovered that you need to go a little bit further in terms of your ideas or your spellcraft. You don't fall under the Wiccan umbrella because you have certain things you need to craft or mould or change or do away with. That's why you're an eclectic witch. So of course, you've moulded your magical craft to you, to your specific needs, to what you feel works for you, to what you feel is true for you. However, what I'm saying is, it's still a lot of the magical techniques and the beliefs about magic and the things that are used inside the circle still don't, to me, seem to be that off the beaten track. Not in terms of the kind of stuff I'm thinking about doing and I'm thinking about, you know, experimenting with, and that I think may really, really work for me on a deep level that is going to last me for the rest of my life. I think I've always been scared to think outside the box when it comes to magic, because it's so much drummed into us that even if you do kind of stray from the main path, or you stray from that accepted idea of what witchcraft is, and you start to experiment, you start to do something a little bit out of the box, even then there are always these kind of rules. Like, there seems to be a certain, almost an unwritten rule about the involvement of the 4 elements, just for an example. This is the kind of thing that doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't feel anything with regard to that. So, you know, I'm learning that chaos magic has a lot to do with creating your own techniques, with going with what you feel works, with experimenting on a grander and more kind of wacky scale. And that interests me a lot, because that's kind of what I'm doing now. And I've begun a project that is of vital importance to me at the moment, and is really, really giving me something, it's almost indescribable. I'm actually starting to write down my Magical Manifesto, and I'm starting to give reason and logic to the ideas that have always been swirling around in my head on this subject. So I'm starting to kind of create my own guidebook almost, in order to validate this idea of magical practice that I have in my head, that I've always thought was batty, was off the wall, was probably, you know, not any form of magic that could be described as actually magic, but was probably just a cross between my overactive imagination and my creative prowess, just kind of coming together in a mishmash. And maybe I was thinking it was magic, maybe I was thinking it was a way to manifest my intent, but really it's not. Really it's madness. Really it needs to be left in the cupboard and not thought about. I'm starting to come out of that idea of denying it now, and I'm starting to accept that it might really be the way forward for me. I'm beginning to write out certain magical techniques that I really want to put into practice, that have come from nowhere but the inside of my own head. And you know, if you're a witch and you utilise magic and you understand even remotely what I'm talking about here, and you have kind of invested time into thinking about magical techniques that are just coming purely from you, just coming from somewhere really, really deep within you, and you've done something about them and they've worked, or, you know, you're thinking that you are following the book and it's not really working for you, and you feel you need to tap into, you know, like the power of something that really means something to you, even if it's not ancient, even if it's not part of any tradition, even if to anyone else it just looks like crappy bullshit or Americana, you know, you want to put it into your practice. If you have any thoughts about this, or it's something that you've ever kind of come across, or you've played around with or experimented with, or you don't feel that your magic is by the book and you feel that it is very, very different to what you've ever heard anyone else talk about, then, you know, message me up, email me, talk to me about it, because it's something that's really going on with me at the moment, and I just wanted to share that, really. And I'm sorry if it didn't make a great deal of sense, but yeah, I'm thinking about starting to do magic my way. And it's very empowering, it really is, and I will take you further along the journey with me, definitely. Thank you very much for listening. Have a lovely evening.